All right, well, it looks like we have a good crowd on here this morning. So thanks everybody for joining. We'll go ahead and get started. This will be our last of the grains team meetings for 2025 with the cropping season kind of coming to the end soon here. So I really appreciate everyone joining and figured we can kind of ask for a couple of updates across the state to just take the temperature of how corn harvest is going and beans are looking, and then we can do have some specialist updates as well. But really hope to facilitate good conversation across the state from everybody's updates and appreciate everyone being here. So Helen, you're first on my screen. If you want to go ahead and start us off with the Eastern Shore update.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a very gloom and doom in terms of soybeans and corn. So the yields have been really poor in field corn, and with soybeans, they've also suffered a lot from drought conditions. I mean, I was looking at some full season soybeans the other day that probably weren't, any higher than 18 to 20 inches tall. Um, and then in addition to that, because we had very hot and dry conditions, we had a lot of pressure from corn earworm and beet armyworm, more than I've seen in quite a few years. So that was the icing on top of the cake for the soybeans. Yeah, so tough for the growers here.
Yeah, I hate to hear that. That's y'all have been a very isolated drought for a long time this year, specifically in Northampton County. So hate to hear it, but thanks for sharing. We'll uh we'll see. I'm trying to pick a somebody who might have something good to say next. Maybe Scott, do you have something good to say?
That's the wrong person to call. Sorry.
Well, I mean, depends on how you look at it. Most of my stuff is doom and gloom, but no, corn is all over the place. I've heard some 110 averages, and I've seen some 250 to 300 bushel contest plots. So, there's some really good corn out there, and there's some not so good corn. And I think the reality is people are somewhere in the 150 to 170. It May hurt it more than people think. We had 8 inches of rain in May, and that yellowed some and drowned spots, and it's not as big around. You got a lot of 14 and 16 row cobs, not 16s and 18s. But then there's some really good corn out there. And I mean, some people are finished, and some people are half done. It's kind of all over the place. I mean, overall, the corn crop's much better than last year. Last year was a total disaster. Peanuts, we did a bunch of pod blasting this week. Most people were 2 to 3 weeks out from maturity, which is kind of expected, late last week of September, 1st of October. Some will be dug next week. Cotton, not hearing a whole lot on that right now. Most where people got to stand, I mean, looks pretty strong, pretty good bowl load, but that's hit or miss too. It's some bad stands in places. Soybeans, that's the one. August 8th was the last good rain we had, and some places got some rain this week. Most places did not, but I mean, it's a little on the late side. So, I mean, beans are definitely hurt. The earlier they got planted, the better chance they got. Then we had the corn earworm. I mean, Tim saw some of that. I mean, we probably sprayed more acres this year for corn earworm than we have in the last 5. 2010 was the last one I remember being as bad or worse as far as corn earworms. But looking back at my rainfall data, the last 2 August that rainfall was similar to this, we were in the 15 to 20 bushel range. You know, when you correspond August rainfall and yields. So there's going to be a few good ones, and there's going to be a bunch of not so good ones. And there's some maturing. Nobody's cut any right in this area yet. I know there's been some cut in places, but yeah, so it's like I said, it's everything's all over the board, but most people are happy with the corn and moving right along. Luckily, the feed mill is still taking it. No major breakdowns, no huge lines. I mean, it's been a pretty steady flow. They can move their corn, and then with West Point has come back online. I guess that they're taking corn again this year, so we don't have the influx from north of the James River necessarily making it down here. So yeah, so I mean, overall things are pretty good right now. So
We'll take that. Thank you.
yeah, and I sent Carrie a picture of some August 11th planted beans. I don't think they have much potential right now, so I texted it to you. So I hadn't got it on my email yet, but yeah, they're about 6 inches tall in 30-inch rows. So we'll.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now. That's
Yeah.
not got a lot of potential, but
No,
they're there, you know.
they're there.
We're not having any rain. They're there.
So that's all I've got. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott. Let's see. Robbie, do you want to give us an update from your neck of the woods?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Scott just said. I don't want to waste folks' time. Up this way, similar situation. Most of August into early September, rainfall was pretty, spotty. Very little rainfall for a lot of folks. We had areas that went 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks with minimum to no rain. So, on the corn side of things, that it led to pretty early dry down. Guys were able to get started picking certainly earlier than maybe we do in a typical year. We had some folks harvesting second, third week of August. Like Scott said, we got some growers that are nearly finished. We got some growers that are halfway, and we got some growers that are just getting started. So we're kind of all over the place. But overall, I mean, corn crop looks pretty decent. I don't think it's as good as folks were hoping, maybe, looking at the potential in the early part of the spring. But just like Scott said, those heavy rains we had early spring, then followed by some heat stress right around tasseling and silking. Honestly, I'm surprised it's doing as good as it is considering some of the stress that it went through. But, I'm hearing yields anywhere in the mid 150 to 170 range, all the way up to, just like Scott said, some contest plots in the 250 to 300 bushel range, and that's dry land. So that's really great yields for our area for dry land. So a lot of it's just, where you are. Some places kept getting the rains throughout the summer to kind of support that. Some places did not. And so, but overall, I think we're certainly looking at, across the board, a average corn crop, I would say. Not as good maybe as we had in 23, but certainly better than last year. So corn looks pretty good. Guys seem to be able to get it moved, which is a good thing. Like Scott said, we got Manel back online in West Point, so that's kind of allowed another outlet for growers to get that too. And so lines have been a little bit better so far this year. On the bean side of things, all over the board, some of the early stuff that was planted, I think has fairly good potential. Probably some 50 to 60 plus bushel beans out there. The stuff that was planted more timely or on average time, and stuff that was planted late certainly is struggling. Some of that stuff when it really needed rain late August, early part of this month, just didn't get it. Frankly, the only thing that, in my mind, saved us from having a major loss was we had relatively cool temperatures. We were pretty fortunate there. The latter part last week of August, we actually had some cool nights here, down in the 50-degree temperature range, and so a little bit of dew in the morning. So that kind of helped them to span a little bit further. We did get a little bit of rain here within the last week or so. We had kind of a day or two there where some folks picked up a half-inch to an inch of rain. So that helped a little bit, but double crops certainly are suffering the most. They have not had very favorable conditions at all, and so they're still pretty short-statured. Didn't get a lot of growth on those, and so I expect yields there to be certainly maybe below average, unless we have something major change here in the next week or two. But yeah, we had some pressure like everybody else with corn earworms and aphids, things like that in the soybean crop. But not the best year we've ever had, I don't think, but certainly not the worst either. So gotta be thankful for that. Could have been a repeat of last year.
Yeah, this year's been very different from last year, so pros and cons for both, but I appreciate the update, and I agree the double crop beans definitely need some significant rain to pull through, and even if we got that today, it may be too late, honestly, for
We need
a substantial yield.
we need a real late frost.
Which doesn't seem like it's in the forecast based on these temperatures we're getting, but who knows? Anything could happen.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Robbie.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, do you have any updates from up your way?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit more positive than Robbie or Scott. Our biggest issue was planting times and too wet, so we actually had some fields that weren't planted at all, or went into to be harvested for days, things like millet and all. But the corn that got in on time has actually done pretty well, and the silage yields were good. They were well above average. So, and I expect probably, I don't know, a little less than half our corn has come off already, and the yields are pretty good there. The early season beans look good. The double crop beans, I guess I'm like Robbie and Scott. I don't know where they're going to be. They were looking pretty good, but we didn't get much rain in August either, so we maybe see some issues with. They still actually look pretty good, but I don't know how well they're going to fill. So we've had a strange year. We have a lot of forage here, and getting the time to cut that was the biggest issue we had, because there was plenty of yield, and I think that showed up when we harvested the silage corn. Did pretty good. So from a feed system, we're in good shape. I think from corn harvest, we're going to be above average, maybe well above average. Soybeans, early beans, I think are going to be pretty good, and double crop beans, they'll be worth harvesting, but I don't know what they're going to yield.
Well, we'll take it. Thanks for the more positive note. I called on the wrong person at first. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to hear things are going well up there. So Bobby Clark had also given some updates from his area down in the valley, and he was saying some similar things. So sounds like, corn is looking good overall. Harvest is off to a strong start. And as he put it in an email, we have a tremendous crop in the field. So we'll take that as a win. And happy to hear that's going well for folks up in the more northern parts of the state there. So let's see, do we have any other agents on here that would like to provide any updates from their areas? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move into some specialist updates. First thing I'd like to do is have Josh Mott introduce himself as a new specialist at the Southern Piedmont AREC.
Hey everyone. I know some of y'all, but for those that don't know me, my name is Joshua Mott. I am 50% research, 50% extension. My title is Cropping Systems and Organic Production. So I'll be covering several cropping systems with an emphasis on organic production. And I know that's an evil word, but I'm excited to, kind of complement several of your programs for the agents, a lot of the work that you're doing. So yeah, I'm excited to get started. I don't really have an update for you beyond I'm here. So
Sounds great. Thanks, Josh. All right. Tim and Kemper, do y'all want to give us an entomology update?
Tim, you want to go first, or
Go ahead.
I'll speak more just for the shore, and let Tim kind of get the rest. But we're working on several things that I'll talk about too. Helen kind of touched base with some of the insects that we've had problems with, not just on the shore, but across the state this year. It's been a pretty caterpillar heavy season. We've had a lot of issues with the armyworm, especially this week on the shore. I don't know how many you caught, and I don't know if Helen's still on the call or not, but however many she caught, I think it was like 500 the armyworm moths in one trap in the past 7 days here at the shore. So unrelated, we have a lot of guys that just put in snap beans, and so they're getting hammered right now with those. But they've been a consistent problem, I think, since probably mid-June. And obviously the corn earworms coming into soybeans like we haven't seen in a long time. I think going into this field season, I would have anticipated seeing more stink bug pressure than we did. We were kind of trending in that direction over the past, I think, 5 years, but really it's been the total opposite. Stink bugs really kind of we had a little bit of a peak early when field corn was starting to put ears on, and then it's really dropped off since then. And I'm starting to see a little bit in some soybeans now, but it's been really quiet on that front, which was really surprising. I think the big takeaway here is I think a lot of our growers weren't expecting to have to increase their input costs for caterpillar control like they did this year, spraying combo products like Besiege. We also had some pretty heavy aphid pressure, soybean aphid pressure this year in beans too, that a lot of folks that may or may not have treated for. I think one important thing worth mentioning on my end, and this is something Tim and I have been working on, is some likely issues with insecticide resistance to our corn earworms as well as bee armyworms. That is, to no surprise, probably some pyrethroid resistance, but mainly this year the big thing has been diamide resistance. So that's going to be your Vanacore, or it could be Vegetables Courage and Evo. That's your cyanotraniliprols or the chlorantraniliprol combo products like Elevest and Besiege. I haven't really heard of any specific field failures, but what we've been doing across the state, as well as Tom Kuhar and Blacksburg, is collecting caterpillars from soybean fields or sweet corn fields, and testing them to field rate levels of diamides. And what we're seeing, and I know Tim, you've looked at that a little bit closer here recently, is that they aren't killing them quite like we were hoping for. I know here in the shore, I think I collected caterpillars from 7 different fields and tested them basically the same day. And at 72 hours, in most cases, even at a 2x field rate, in some cases, only 50 or 60% of the caterpillars were dying at a 2x rate. So that's extremely concerning, because usually our diamides are something that we've been leaning on heavily here, especially with our pyrethroid resistance that we know exists. So that's just something to be on the lookout for, going into next growing season. Or if you have vegetable growers in your area, they're still putting some stuff in, because not only corn earworms, but the bee armyworms have diamide resistance as well. I've run a couple assays as well on them, and we're still seeing 50 or 60% mortality on them as well. So that's kind of a big thing happening this year. Again, haven't heard of any field failures, but it's good to mention it here just so you guys are aware that that is happening.
Yeah, so add to that. We had some of those products that Kemper mentioned, Besiege and Prevathon, which is just the chlorantraniliprol alone, and we had that in a couple different locations where we had some good corn earworm pressure. So up in Scott's neck of the woods, he had some heavy pressure, and then we put one in Chesapeake for our entomology field day. And it still looked pretty good in the field, which is a good sign. But like Kemper mentioned, some of the results that we got from the stuff in the lab is slightly concerning. And so it's something we're going to be looking at moving forward for sure. But it's not something I would necessarily say we're raising red flags on entirely yet. So yeah, again, several people have mentioned it already, but it was a big worm year. We saw some pretty heavy cornea worm pressure, and got some good insecticide data on that. And soybean aphids, particularly on the shore and in the northern neck, and we tried to get some data on that, and they crashed, which is a good thing about soybean aphids is, you know, you might have a huge population and it drops to zero in a matter of 4 or 5 days. So probably not something I would expect to see every year. But it's typically kind of a cool, wet pest. And they really started popping up when it was sort of hot and dry at the end of July. So a little bit out of the ordinary for them to start showing up at that point in this year. So possibly something to think about.
Tim,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Ollie.
we had those like cooler temperatures at night in August, and that's when I really saw them popping up, the soybean
Yeah.
aphids. I mean, I was in field where you could actually see the honeydew and the stickiness. I've never seen that before.
So it was early August when they started showing up there.
Yeah, really in, heavy spots, like hot spots in the fields. But then we got rain, 3 inches of rain, the only rain we got around Aaron. And then they
Yeah. And correct me if I'm misremembering, Robbie, but it was a little bit earlier in the northern neck, right, that they started showing up.
Yeah, Tim, we started seeing some up this way, I would say maybe late third week of July or something like that. We started seeing populations build, and I mean, they really sustained for, I would say maybe 2 to 3 weeks or so in some locations. And then when they finally crashed, they just totally disappeared.
Yeah. So the other thing that we've been working on this year is we have a big trial on station. And we talked about this at the field day yesterday, and Dr. Langston and I have gone back and forth on if growers are spraying their fungicide at R3 and throwing the insecticide in there, or they're spraying their insecticide at R3 and throwing a fungicide in there. But either way, the reality of the situation is a lot of what we see is just, all right, it's time to drive over the field and put out my pesticides, fungicides, or insecticides. So we had a big trial this year here in Virginia, that I'm leading that also includes I think 14 other states. So it goes all the way from Louisiana, where they have really heavy insect pressure basically every year, and things that are hard to kill, like red-banded stink bugs, up through Illinois and North Dakota, where most of the time they don't have any insect pressure. And the idea was that we were just comparing that automatic application versus what we recommend as specialists and IPM, using IPM. So what pests people were targeting is going to be different across all these different locations, but the comparison is the same as if you spray automatically an insecticide or a fungicide or both at R3, how does that compare to what we're recommending at all these different extension meetings? So I was kind of hoping we were going to get away with not spraying our IPM treatment in this study, but we did end up treating it for soybean loopers last week. We had some pretty heavy defoliation, probably up to maybe 30%. And the thing that I didn't really expect to see, and is not really the result that I necessarily wanted, but it is what we saw, was some of those plots that got an automatic application at R3 were significantly less defoliated. So a lot of times we talk about that pyrethroid spray early flaring up soybean loopers later on. And we just didn't really see that, at least in these small plots. So it's not done yet. We're continuing to monitor, and obviously the yield data will be the big thing with that. And hopefully we're going to do some economic analysis across all these different sites. So it's a exciting trial, and it encompasses a lot of different specialists from a lot of different places focusing on different insects. So it should be an interesting data set. And I think that's all I have, Carrie.
All right. Thanks, Tim and Kemper. That's yeah, it's been a big year for y'all with a couple of different pests popping up, but great to hear your updates, and I'm curious to see how the trial comes back with the automatic spray, because that's something I've often wondered, and I know that's a very common practice. So cool. Thank y'all. So next on my list is weed science. So I believe we have Dr. Flesner on here to give us an update.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Just a couple quick updates. I guess just a reminder that harvest is a good time to scout for weeds and then inform some winter planning. So if you get an opportunity to encourage, farmers to maybe just jot down a couple of the weeds they're seeing they have problems with, right, to help get a better herbicide program for next year, that's a good time. The other thing I would encourage farmers to do is, cleaning a combine is kind of an academic thing to say, but if we can at least get a leaf blower out there and blow off the stuff you can, run maybe a bale of straw through it that's weed free, weed seed free, to kind of knock some things loose, particularly when you're leaving a weedy field before you're going on to any other fields. That could be really helpful. I've seen some of the back axles of these combines just covered in herbicide resistant weed seeds pulling into a clean field sometimes, and it's kind of discouraging that 4 or 5 minutes with a leaf blower could really I think save some of the spread of those weed seeds there. The other update I've got is, well, I know we've probably got some herbicide resistant weeds out there, or at least some suspected ones, and it's a good time to collect some seeds for that, to try to we'll get those in the greenhouse this winter. So I know, Scott Ryder, I need to get some goosegrass seed from you. I'll be in Blackstone probably next week to harvest corn, if that's but maybe we can get with each other after the call here. That might work. So yeah, so if you have some suspected populations that the herbicides were applied at the right time, with the right weather and all that stuff that they should be working, and they're not, let me know and we'll try to get some seed to test those. The last one update I have is just the dicamba use in XtendFlex crops. That comment period with the EPA is now closed, and so it continues to be on track for having those products for use in 2026, but there's still a lot of hurdles to get over, through the EPA's registration process. So as growers are making seed purchasing decisions, something to keep in mind is that we don't have it yet, and there's ways to go there, but it is on track. It is a new set of proposed restrictions, and so we don't know if those will actually make it to the final label or not. But the big one for Virginia, I won't go into all of them, but the big one is, instead of a day, like a calendar day cutoff period, which was previously in 2024, it was June 30th in soybeans and July 30th in cotton. They've changed that to a temperature-based cutoff. So over 75 degrees, there's some additional restrictions, 85 more restrictions, and do not apply after 95 degrees. So it will give us maybe some more utility for use in our double crop soybean, which was pretty much not going to work last time we had dicamba products for use in XtendFlex crops. So yeah, it just continues to be sort of a moving target with the restrictions around that, the availability of it and all that. So just keep that in mind for your seed purchasing decisions as those come your way. But if you want more, the sort of full details of what those are, the new proposed restrictions and where we are in the timeline, I'm happy to give you guys a more detailed update, maybe by email or something. So, but that's it for me.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dr. Flesner. So I believe plant pathology is next on my list, and Yuan, I think, has a schedule conflict. So we'll let her go first and then bump it to David.
I have my student here. Can you give him the permission to share his screen? But before that, I just wanted to give a quick update on tar spot situation this year. Usually based on our observation in the last 2 years, tar spot of corn, it's only being found in Shenandoah County. However, this year we have seen it moved to Rockingham already. And previously, we see tar spot development usually around late August or early September in Shenandoah County. However, this year when I first saw tar spot, it was late July in Shenandoah. And many of the corns, whether it's sweet corn or used for silage, if it's late planting, we see them this year in both counties as well. And another observation, previously we see tar spot development usually from the upper canopy and then move to the ear leaf. But this year we see most of the fields has been identified positive. It's developed from the lower canopy and then keep moving up. My concern is since it's spreading out now and we have our spore trap data, in several counties being tested positive for this pathogen. With the weather conduciveness, it may show up in other counties as well. Kamal, is there anything you want to add on?
Let me share this screen. Okay, so okay, good morning, everyone. I won't take much of your time, and I know your time is so valuable. So without any further delay, I wanted to talk about the tar spot disease of the corn. This disease is caused by phyllochromatis. And then whenever these weather conditions are conducive for these pathogens, let's say the temperatures, it requires a cooler temperature, starting from like 60 to 73 degrees Fahrenheit. And then if you want to convert it into the Celsius, it will be 16 to 23, roughly. That means it requires the cooler temperature and then relative humidity more than 75%. And if the relative humidity exceeded more than 90%, it hampers the development of the tar spot. And in addition to that, it requires the leaf wetness more than 7 hours. So when all these conditions meet, the pathogen infect the corn. Of course, there needs to be the presence of the pathogens, which I will be talking about the presence of the pathogen in my later slide. And then when all these conditions meet, they penetrate the epidermis layer of the corn leaf, and then we can see the sign, which is indicated by these black glossy structures, which we call it as a stromata. So when they develop, they impair the photosynthetic area of the leaf, and then which ultimately reduce the photosynthetic area of the corn, and then at the end of the day impairs the reduce the corn yield. Now I would like to share my experience. As Dr. Yuan already mentioned earlier, we first observed the tar spot in Shenandoah County in 2022. And then since then, we have been observing the pathogens and the sign of these pathogens in that county. I think it's almost 3 years. We have been seeing it continuously. And interestingly, this year, there is another county which has been adding to this list. This is Rockingham. And then now, my another locations is in the Montgomery, which is in Blacksburg. And then this pathogen is moving or spreading from this Shenandoah County to Rockingham County. And then in very soon, it may move to the Blacksburg as well. So considering all these factors, there is a need to monitor the pathogens, right? So in order to monitor that pathogens, we deploy the spore trap, and then we deploy this spore trap to collect the spores from the field, and then took it to the lab, and then by means of extracting the DNA from these spores, and then using the metagenomic sequencing approach, we are detecting the reads that were mapped to the phyllochromatis, which is the causative agent of tar spot. And in addition to that, you can see We also install the weather stations in each locations from which we are collecting the weather data from each locations. And then I am actually doing the correlations analysis with the disease severity in order to identify which are the weather variables that are conducive for the pathogens and which are highly correlating, which are highly negatively correlating, positive correlating, and so on. I am putting here the video. I don't know why this video is not playing. Sorry, my bad. So in this video, what I was trying to show was in this particular locations, I went last week, if I remember it correctly. The tarry spot, the severity of tarry spot disease was severe in the lower canopy as compared to the upper canopy. So what does this indicate is the tarry spot, the pathogens of tarry spot, which is the Phylacura meris, which was residing in the corn residue. That means that disease was present there last year as well. So from that, it is infecting from the lower canopy and then going to the upper canopy. But if in case you see the tarry spot disease severity higher in the upper canopy and then lower in the lower canopy, so that indicates the tarry spot, the pathogens of the tarry spot, which is the Phylacura meris, have been traveled from another locations to that locations. And then now, I would like to briefly talk about what we are doing right now. So at this point of time, so we have, there are different strategies from which we can manage the tarry spot. So one of them is obviously the fungicide application. And then the current fungicide applications method that growers are applying, it is on the basis of the corn growth stage based fungicide applications without even considering the presence of the pathogens, which leading to either the too early applications of the fungicides or too late apply of the fungicides, and then unnecessary applications of the fungicides. So there is, I mean, we do have the current disease risk predictions tool, which predict and then tell the grower that, well, this is the time to apply the fungicides in the field. But based on my observation, and then I try to check their model, you can see this is the early phase, which is starting from April to July. And then they are predicting, okay, it's like the high probability of occurrence of the tarry spot disease in the field. But when I visited the field, I didn't see any tarry spot there. So which means the current disease risk prediction tool, which is only considering the weather factors, and then without even considering the presence of the pathogens, this is predicting the disease. This is not predicting the disease accurately. So instead, what we are trying to do is, as I mentioned earlier, they just included the environmental factors there. And then in my study, we have conducted in 2023 and 2024, where we have deployed the weather station in order to collect the weather data. And then probably you remember the spore trap that we installed in each locations from which we are collecting these spores in order to identify the pathogens. And then we also conducting the hybrid susceptibility trials in each locations, and from which we can include all these three factors, and then put that into the model so that we can predict the disease accurately and then inform the growers so that they don't have to apply the fungicides even if the disease presence is not there. So yeah, this is it. It was I try to make it short and sweet, and then sorry for taking a lot of time. So if you have any question, please, you can ask me.
Any questions for us? We do have multi-location fungicide trial. Kamal did not touch that. So this year we got calls from some extension agent and they said they treated their corn while planting, but if the pathogen is in that area, by only apply fungicide at planting, it's not going to help. The pathogen has been identified not in Shenandoah County. We also see the pathogen presence in Blacksburg, which is in Montgomery County in Sussex, Tidewater, Iraq area. Wausau, the extension agent there did let me know that 2 years ago they found positive presence of tar spot disease. However, we haven't seen disease symptoms or signs in Lancaster area at now, but we do have the spore trap set there for this season to see whether the pathogen is there or not. But Kamal, did you look at the New Kent location whether we see tar spot pathogen, or we haven't there? We are not there yet.
I checked like 1 times and then I didn't see any ties were there, but I have not completed all of them. So
Okay. So basically, the locations that we had our spore trap study, I would say 90% of them we got like tar spot pathogen presence. But the disease kind of like restricted in Shenandoah and it's moving around, following that path that Kamal showed in his earlier presentation. Fungicide wise, we do see Valtma, what else? Trivapro
yeah.
and Adastriol showed some inhibitory effect to the disease. Did I miss anything, Kamal?
I think you covered all of it.
Okay, so that's us. But another thing that I wanted to touch a little bit, and then Dr. Lanston can comment on that, is the southern corn rust. We see a heavier infection of southern corn rust pathogen this year. I only saw that in 2022, and I did not see it in 2023 or 2024. But this year, for the location that Kamal visited, the severity of southern corn rust is quite high. Some of the leaves, we do see that there is at least 20% of coverage. It's just this year, the weather, you get a lot of rains and then it cools down and then heat up. It's quite favorable for many of those leaf diseases that we are looking at. With that, that's from our side, and I will pass to Dr. Lanston.
Good morning. I'm gonna try to keep it short and try to be as positive as possible. The dry weather has pretty much stalled a lot of the diseases that we would normally be worrying about. So that's one upside of the dry weather. So we did see a few diseases, and mostly frog eye, get kicked off a little bit around the 1st of August. But since then, it has increased, but it's increased very slowly. The other thing, and probably the biggest thing that I'm seeing that I'm concerned about, are control failures for peanut leaf spot. I've had several reports this year across several different types of fungicide spray programs, and it's a lot more leaf spot than I would imagine seeing with some of the types of some spray programs. Don't surprise me, but some of them do surprise me. So I'm really looking for outbreaks where fungicide failures seem to fail, because we're going to crank up and try to do some fungicide sensitivity testing with different leaf spot populations to see if we can, get a handle on either resistance issues or sensitivity issues. And not necessarily related to that, but somewhat, is this time of year, a lot of people ask questions about, I'm getting pretty close to digging my peanuts. Should I put on a fungicide application? And typically what I've been telling people is to spray either chlorothalonil product like Bravo or Provo Silver if you're further away than 2 weeks of digging. So if you're 2.5, 3 weeks or more from digging, yeah, you might want to think about putting a leaf spot spray on, but just one of those fungicides. I wouldn't recommend anything else. If you do spray Provo Silver, if you put some micronized sulfur with it, you'll get a little added protection. But generally we put sulfur in when we've already got a good bit of leaf spot and we want to have better curative control. But most of my concerns lately have been with peanut leaf spot, not seeing as maybe average or below average amounts of what I've seen and heard of SDS in soybeans across the state. I'm not 100% sure what Yuan, how much she's seeing, but I haven't seen quite as much as I've seen in the past. Are we on the lookout for red crown rot? We've had a couple of instances where I've seen pictures of soybean plants that may have red crown rot. I have not confirmed it, but it's a big problem in the Midwest. Right now, it's a really emerging problem there. They're having a lot of issues with it, and we have the potential to have a good bit of problems with red crown rot, which is the same pathogen that used to cause black root rot in peanuts. But I haven't confirmed any of it.
There was a location in, let me see, it's either in Brunswick County I visited. I suspect it could be red crown rot. Because there is no mycelia presence for Fusarium vergiliforme, and the foliar symptom is very similar to SDS. It's in the incubator. I'm trying to germinate the spores, and I will let you know.
Yeah. That pathogen is really easy to isolate. I mean, so it is 100% recoverable if you do a biopsy on it. I mean, it's very recognizable. But I haven't really seen anything that I can confirm as red crown rot, but we're on the lookout for it. And I'll advise people in the peanut growing counties that if you see or hear about any control failures with leaf spot, let me know about it. We'd like to be able to collect some samples so we can put them through some fungicide testing and work towards being able to identify fungicide insensitivity or fungicide resistance. And that's really all I've got.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate all of the detail you on and Kamal and the positivity, David. So thank you. And all right. So the last update before agronomy is soil fertility. So I see Mark Ryder's on here if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're working on lately. Thank you.
You are
Terry,
muted.
mute.
Can you hear me now? All right, sorry, having a bit of a moment there. Nobody else could hear Mark though, right? This is okay. All right, we'll skip ahead to agronomy then. And so Olga couldn't join us today from corn harvest, but she did say that so far they've had excellent yields, so that's exciting. And they're working on Mount Holly soon. They got delayed from rain, so that's always good to hear that there's somebody across the state's getting rain. And then I had just a couple of quick comments. I think we've touched on the drought issues with soybeans, and really the later they were planted, the more concern we have with pod fill. But the earlier planted beans, we have started to get some ultra early planted beans that have been harvested. And we've seen some really good yields so far with those. So we have started the soybean yield contest. And so I'll share the agenda here, and there's a link in the agenda for anybody, but it's up online through the Virginia Soybean Association. So if you've got some good farmer fields interested in submitting, the early planted beans, I think, are going to have an advantage there. But overall, I'm optimistic about the bean yields across the state, and really already looking forward to next year. So I'm looking for a couple of sites for on-farm research next year. So I wanted to put the plug in now, basically looking for sites for low soil test phosphorus, really preferably in the Suffolk area for a study with Hunter. And then low soil test potassium sites anywhere across the state would be great. This will be part of our Science for Success collaborative research project, is looking at potassium soybean responses to pre-plant and in-season potassium. So if you have any farmers that might have low soil test potassium and high yield potential, that's our perfect site. So that would be fantastic if you can think of anybody and would be willing to have us out there for next year. So I think Joseph also has a couple of updates regarding wheat and on-farm trials.
Yeah, I guess for some good news, I'll say that we've gotten more rain in the last week than we got like the previous 6 weeks. So we've gotten 1.5 inches here in the last week. So that's good news, I guess. And like Carrie said, our ultra early soybeans will start harvesting those next week. Couple other things just to mention. As probably many of you are aware, when we did our stakeholder listening sessions last year with growers and agents across the state, I think a few of you were involved with that. One of the things that was really mentioned a lot was a return on investment for variable rate fertility, and we were funded through a CALS integrated seed grant to do several on-farm trials with that. And we've got 2 locations this year for both corn and soybean, and trying to find a few more for next year. So if you got any growers that are interested in that, and they don't even really have to have access to variable rate. I've been working with a couple growers who are working with folks like Nutrient or someone like that that can help them collect those grid samples. But if you got someone who's interested in that, please contact me. We're trying to get 5 to 6 sites for next year. In case one site falls through. So, and then and that's for corn or soybeans. We're working with both. This year we've got one of each, and with those growers, we're hoping to flip those next year based on their rotation. And then just one other thing I'll add, Robbie and I have been working on, I think for the past 2 or 3 years now, some on-farm wheat planting date work. And we just got that published in an extension publication. I know right now not a lot of folks are growing wheat, but if you do have any wheat growers, feel free to share that with them. The last couple of years, we've been getting a lot of questions about how late should we delay wheat planting and things of that nature. So that link is on the agenda here, and it's on the VCE site as well.
All right, thanks, Joseph.
Yep, thank
We'll
you.
see if Mark wants to chime in and give any soil fertility updates. But generally speaking, thanks to everyone for joining. I know there is some doom and gloom across the state, but I think there is also some tremendous yield potential and a lot of good things going on, and looking forward to some more research next year. So if there are things that I guess I'll ask this question for any agents that are left on here, if there's any topics that you think should be focused on next year, or any issues that would warrant some additional research, I would definitely welcome any of that feedback.
Yeah, I'm just kind of getting my feet wet with the the crops here. So this is very helpful just to kind of get a, more information just on what y'all seeing across the Commonwealth, as well as all your work into these emergent diseases. So I think more agents should attend this, even just to listen in.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's hopefully it's been helpful. It's been helpful for me, I will say that. I really appreciate hearing from all of y'all about what's going on across the state, and that helps me plug in a lot for areas that I haven't necessarily traveled to in the past few weeks, because things change so quickly. So anyways, really appreciate all your time, and I'll share the recording for this and the agenda. So basically, I've got notes from each of the updates, and we've got some links in here. We'll share that out on Monday for anybody that may have had a schedule conflict, because I believe there's a lot of people out picking corn right now. So hopefully they've got some good news to share as well when they get back into the office.
Carrie, can I share one more doom and gloom thing that's not necessarily grain crop related, but we have some people who might want to know on here?
Go for it.
So we have a new pest, mainly of cotton. The 2-spot leafhopper, I think, is what we're going with for the official common name. But it showed up in Florida late in 24. And then this year we really started looking at it, the group of entomologists in the Southeast, and basically have found it everywhere in the Southeast. So Alabama, they found it in Mississippi last week or earlier this week. They found it in Texas on ornamental plants. Basically everywhere that they grow cotton in South Carolina. They found it in North Carolina earlier this week. So we've been looking for it. We haven't seen it here yet, but just something to be aware of. So it feeds on cotton, where it can be a major pest, but you can find it on okra. The pest alert that the Florida Department of Ag put out basically lists all of the crops that I work with as potential hosts. So soybeans, peanut, you can find it on okra. The big ornamental plant that you can find it on is hibiscus. So the entomologists at Texas A&M went to, I think, 2 or 3 Home Depots in College Station and found it on hibiscus plants at all of them as soon as he heard about it. So just be aware of that. If you start seeing anything that looks like hopper burn on cotton or peanuts, or if you have some okra in your yard, or maybe snap beans on the Eastern Shore for Helen. I think we lost Kemper, but we've talked about it. That hopper burn usually starts as like yellowing on the outside of leaves. If you happen to be at Home Depot, flip over the leaves of a hibiscus plant and see if you find it there. I just wanted to mention it just so everyone is aware that it is potentially on the way.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I've been seeing that from a lot of my social media or friends and things in the Southeast. So I think that's been pretty significant for them down there. So good to bring up. All right. Well, somehow we're already at 10 o'clock. So thanks to everyone for joining, and I'll send this out, but really appreciate all y'all's time and hope to stay in touch. The plan for this for next year is basically to start this up again next April. So, don't need to have crop updates throughout the winter necessarily. But we'll begin this again next April, and I'll probably send out another poll for times that work well for folks. We had picked the second Friday of the month at 9 this year, but I know schedules change, so I'll be back in touch probably next March, and we can start getting this on our calendars again. So look forward to seeing everybody in the winter meetings. So thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Carrie.